Of this moment in history, and now we get to what's happening today, and that is the anticipation growing that the delivery of the Mueller report could be imminent. Special counsel watchers seem to be looking for clues everywhere, from the TMZ-style photo of Bob Mueller arriving to work yesterday morning to the Attorney General, who was spotted arriving at the White House yesterday for an unrelated event. Former FBI Director James Comey, whose firing by the president led to Mueller's appointment, is also explaining what he wants from the special counsel report. In an op-ed for the New York Times, Comey writes in part this: "Even though I believe Mr. Trump is morally unfit to be president of the United States, I'm not rooting for Mr. Mueller to demonstrate that he's a criminal. I'm also not rooting for Mr. Mueller to clear the president. I'm not rooting for anything at all except that the special counsel be permitted to finish his work." Comey also calls for, quote, maximum transparency about the special counsel's work, writing, quote, "I don't know all the considerations that will go into deciding precisely what to say about the completion of that work and when to say it, but because the Department of Justice is guided first and always by the public interest, it should provide details about finished investigations when the public needs to know them, as it traditionally has." Former FBI director also writes that he hopes Congress does not remove the president from office, arguing that a significant portion of the country would see that as a coup, leading to more division.
Enough of Mr. Comey.
Yeah, no, the bigger thing, Joe, is just what happens when it is delivered. That's going to be huge breaking news.
Right.
But of course, the process is that it goes to it doesn't go to the public, and it may not, but there are ways for the public to see it. Couldn't, for example, the Oversight Committee subpoena Robert Mueller at some point?
Well, they could. Here's the thing. Everybody is talking about the Mueller report's imminent release. It's something that we've been hearing about now for several months. People have actually been talking about it.
There have been false alarms.
Wrapping up for years. There's been one false alarm after another. Willie, what I just don't understand is,
although the president
why would the report come out today? Why would it come out today when Robert Mueller asked court for 6 more weeks to try to sort out the Gates plea deal? Why would the deal? Why would the report come out now when you still have Roger Stone in a position where they need to get information from him and they need to do their best to try to flip him? There's still work to be done. That's why some noon deadline today makes no sense.
Yeah, it does seem like there are a lot of loose ends that need to be tied up. I will say it's a tribute to Robert Mueller that we have no idea when this report will come out. It's a tribute to the operation he's running and the professionalism of him and his team, Clint, that there have been all these false alarms, these guesses, because no one knows. No one's in that room. That's effectively been a black box now for 2 years. What do you think about this transparency question, though? We had Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut on yesterday. He's sponsoring legislation that would force the Mueller report to become public with redactions where they're necessary. Do you believe full transparency is the way to go here?
Based on the past 2 years, I think full transparency on anything just leads to conspiracy on both sides. They seem to parse the facts that they want to push their political agenda.
Right.
But at the same point, there is no way we can not disclose to the public the essential nuggets of what this investigation returned. And we should do that for several reasons. One, we don't ever want to go through this again. We've lost sight of why we started this in the beginning. Do we or do we not want influence from a foreign power in our elections? Do we or do we not want foreign money flowing into our political candidates potentially? Do we or do we not want obstruction of justice to exist? Those things, these are legislative things. We should get more from this report than just, oh, one team won or one team didn't win. I think the other part is this started based on Russian influence of the election. We really don't know the full scope of that. All of the money discussions have really been behind closed doors. I have no idea what that is. I research this stuff all the time. So I think the big part of this to sort of think through moving forward is what does get put out to the public. We forget there's a critical national security component to this. It's called WikiLeaks. We've already heard of, possible sealed indictments against WikiLeaks. This has been something that's been floating in national security for years, that if we were to go after WikiLeaks, it could lead to massive information dumps of U.S. secrets around the world. this will probably never come out, or they'll have to make a decision. I think that's the key thing. Like Joe was talking about, there is not a moment when the report hits. AG Barr, former Director Mueller, know how Washington works. The moment that report lands in Barr's inbox or gets delivered to his desk, a clock starts, and they're going to work that plan out, and they'll be prepared for it.
To Joe's point, Clint, though, when you look at the work that still has to be done around Roger Stone or Rick Gates, doesn't it look like Bob Mueller still has some work ahead of him?
I think he does, but I've always believed that he's had a safety valve, which is to quickly spin off these investigations into other districts. That way, if the special counsel investigation gets shut down, he can then make sure that the investigation lives on through tentacles that are almost impossible to stop. I imagine those investigations have already begun. I think that's what you see with the downsizing of staff in the special counsel office. They probably already splintered out. And I imagine there'll be some sort of cell at the special counsel's office for a year or more that will have to answer questions not only to those districts, but to Congress and others as well.
Joe, one thing we know for sure is that a lot of people in this country have made up their minds already, one way or another, whether the Trump campaign colluded. So they will project those feelings onto that report in whatever form it comes out in, whenever it does.
Again, because we really are just seeing darkly right now through looking through a glass, not being able to tell what exactly is going on in the office. We may, for instance, get a report today on Russian interference. Then maybe that's followed later by a report on obstruction, and then maybe later that's followed by a report on collusion. Again, the idea that this all ends today makes very little sense given all the loose strings that still need to be tied up. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories, and you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.